When it comes to paying for college, there are so many terms. It can be overwhelming and certainly confusing. EFC, SAI, FAFSA, student loans, subsidized, unsubsidized, the list goes on. Now, sometimes we take for granted the understanding of some of these terms, and so I wanted to cover two majorly different terms in today's video, and that is student loans versus scholarships. One of which we want to minimize, one of which we want to maximize. Now make sure you hit subscribe because every week we have a new strategy for you to show you how to avoid the student loans and instead secure scholarships. Hey there, my name is Jocelyn Pearson, founder of the Scholarship System, where we redefine paying for college to help families build strong financial futures rather than ones buried in student loan debt. I don't know if you knew this, but the average of paying back student loans is 21 years, and we do not want students to get sucked into that. Now, we've helped families secure over $13 million today, and we are not stopping there. So again, make sure you hit subscribe because we've got lots of tips. Now, when it comes to understanding student loans versus scholarships, some of you might be thinking this is a pretty obvious question or answer, but I have met students and parents that accidentally accepted loans without realizing it. And the reason is because it is worded a little tricky depending on the school and their financial aid letter. So when this student in particular comes to mind, they did not realize it was debt because it was worded as a financial aid award. So they thought that meant that it didn't have to be paid back. And over a couple years, they borrowed $13,000. Now, that might not seem like a lot compared to some of the numbers we hear out there, $50, $60, $80, $100,000. Still, $13,000 is something we don't want to have to pay back if we didn't realize we were borrowing it. And the worst part was that they actually didn't even necessarily need that money. It was excess, but again, they thought it was free, so they accepted it. So that is why it is so important to understand the difference between these two very different terms. So let's talk about student loans. So student loans are that kind of money where it has to be paid back. And depending on the type of student loan, there will be interest, and when it starts accumulating may vary. So there are two main types of categories with student loans, or I guess we could say three. One is subsidized loans. This is where the interest does not start accumulating until a student graduates from college or leaves college. Secondly is unsubsidized. This is where interest starts ticking the minute we borrow the money. And both of these are government-based loans, subsidized and unsubsidized. So the only way to tap into these are by submitting FAFSA. Now, typically the terms are the best for these, and students can borrow the money without having to have a cosigner. So ideally, these are the first line of defense if we do have to borrow money. We'll get to scholarships, so hopefully we won't need to, but just in case, we do need to understand this. Now, with unsubsidized, you can choose to pay the interest during the school year, and that way it's not accumulating for those 4 years, but still you have to pay it, where with subsidized loans, that interest is taken care of for the first 4 years. Now, the third type that's also provided through the government are Parent Plus loans, and these can be very dangerous because students and parents can sign for a lot of money, and this is where it can be a slippery slope for some students, and them and their parents can borrow a lot more than what they thought they would. Now, parents, one thing I have to say is if you co-sign, you cannot transfer responsibility. We have met families where their child graduated from college, didn't get a job, and just decided not to pay the loans. And they knew their parents would because their parents' social security numbers or parents' credit history was tied to the loan as well. And so the parents had to pay it. One specifically, this mother, her daughter did nursing school, 6 figures in debt, co-signed it all, and her daughter just didn't get a job and didn't pay it off. And it ruined their relationship, unfortunately. So this is something to take very, very, very seriously. Co-signing loans is not something to do lightly, even if everyone around you is doing it. This is why we do what we do at the Scholarship System, so that you and your student can hopefully avoid even having to face this situation. But that said, you do want to keep it within an amount that you could comfortably pay if for some reason your student doesn't. Now, credit is a factor here. So if you have bad credit, your student might need a different cosigner, but credit does matter with the Parent Plus loans. And also, just to note, you pretty much cannot claim bankruptcy on these either. Now, outside of the government loans, the subsidized, unsubsidized, and the parent loans, there are private student loans. So we have a whole list of lenders. If you go to the scholarshipsystem.com/lenders, we'll link to that in the description as well. So if you have capped out of the government loans or if you want to shop around, we do have our favorite providers if a student does need student loans. Now, I have an entire playlist all about student loans showing how interest is calculated, explaining in more depth the difference between subsidized, unsubsidized, and private loans, all of that. So check out that playlist. Again, we'll link to that in the description as well below. So everything that I mentioned, all the free resources I'm offering you are going to be below in the description. Okay, now let's switch to the fun one, scholarships. So when it comes to scholarships, the good news with scholarships is that they do not have to be paid back. I secured 6 figures in scholarships. I literally got paid to go to college. What does that mean? That means that I received enough money that the balance on my account from all of the scholarships that they received was greater than my bill. So what I did was I paid my bill, and then whatever the leftover amount was each semester, the university actually cut me a check. We call this an overage check. It was a beautiful thing. Now, there are so many different avenues of securing scholarships. Again, this is what the scholarship system is all about. Now, if you want to learn about the different types of money and also where to find scholarships, I do have a free webinar. It's about an hour long. You can go to scholarshipsystem.com/free webinar, or you can click the video here, or you'll find the link in the description as well. And that will give you much more in-depth detail, including showing you how to find the ones that are not on the big search engines that everyone else is applying to. But that said, when it comes to scholarships, a lot of people think of scholarships as, say, athletic scholarships because we are an elite athlete, or university scholarships because we are valedictorian. But there are so many scholarships out there, even for students that have a 3.2, or they didn't do the ACT, or maybe they're not the most involved, but they're very studious, or vice versa. There are so many scholarships out there for so many different things. Now, just to quickly give you a few ideas of categories, again, we mentioned that there's athletic scholarships. Believe it or not, less than 2% of athletes get scholarships, get free rides. So this is actually a very difficult path, which is a little bit ironic to me always, because people shoot for these from when kids are really, really little, but actually it's kind of one of the worst bets when it comes to scholarships. That said, not impossible, but very limited. For example, the actual organizations behind collegiate sports only allow them to give out so many scholarships, and it's very few compared to how many are on the team. Now, that said, through universities, there are also merit-based scholarships. This can be for leadership, community service, grades, valedictorian, salutatorian. So these are great scholarships because they can drastically bring down the bill. This is where shopping around for colleges is a huge step in the right direction, because we can knock off, say, $10,000 a year by just choosing a different school because they offered us money. Now, if your student has a couple of years until school, I actually recommend looking up the universities that they're considering or maybe might go to, and look up what their institutional scholarships require. That way your student can actually set targets to hit those numbers, and then they'll have a higher chance of getting the money from the university come their senior year. Now, beyond from the university, we also have private scholarships. So these can be awarded by companies, any kind of companies, credit unions, banks, lawyers' offices, doctors' offices, you name it, PTAs, PTSAs, sororities, fraternities, leadership organizations. There are so many. Actually, the scholarship system, we give out an annual scholarship every single summer. So there are so many places to find scholarships. Now, outside of institutional versus private scholarships, you also have need-based versus merit-based. So need-based that's money that doesn't have to be paid back, but it's based on having financial need. This is also where you can talk about FAFSA. When we submit our FAFSA, if your family is lower income or moderate income, you may receive something called the Pell Grant, which does not have to be paid back. So grants, that is all based on financial need though. On the other side, there are merit ones. And again, like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean a 4.0. It doesn't mean a perfect student. there are scholarships that are not need-based and yet do not require a student to be the absolute top of the top, okay? So again, I cover where to find these and I organize them in much more detail in that free webinar. So again, check that out at thescholarshipsystem.com/free training, or you can find the link in the description. So comment below, did you know the difference between these two, or was it confusing? Are there any other terms that you're confused about? Comment with that below and I can record a video on that. So that said, student loans versus scholarships is very important to understand because that is a huge difference between the two. But once you nail it down, it's very clear. If we can, we want to absolutely avoid student loans and we want to maximize that scholarship money, which is what we do in the scholarship system, helping families secure now over $13 million. Now, make sure you hit subscribe because every week I have a new video to help you and your student avoid that student loan debt. And make sure you check out that free webinar in the description. I'll see you in the next video.